Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rav Shmuel here with you with this week's 10-minute Torah. Let me be the first to wish you all in advance, a little bit of advance, Chag Sameach Pesach. That's right, we're starting Passover very, very soon. We just had, about a week or so ago, we had the new month. And gosh, what a big service it was, 3 Torahs. I always anticipated 3 Torahs for Hanukkah, 3 Torahs for Passover at a few weeks before Passover doesn't really happen that often. But we had a confluence of holidays. We had, of course, just the regular Torah portion, and then we had the new month, and then we had Shabbat HaChodesh, which is the Sabbath right before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first month of the year. And yes, it is the first month of the year. There was a little bit of, well, let's just call it a discussion in the synagogue about the correct Haftorah portion. Now, you would think that the Haftorah would be what's called Shabbat HaChodesh. So it is a special Haftorah that's read whenever the new moon, the new month, occurs on Shabbat. And there's also a special Haftorah reading when that Sabbath, that Shabbat, is the day before the new month. It's called Machar Chodesh. Tomorrow is the new month. And in fact, we have a couple of B'nai Mitzvot that are actually going to be reading that Haftorah for their portion. However, being that it was a special Shabbat, it was Shabbat HaChodesh, the Sabbath of the new month, which again falls before, or in this case, on the Shabbat of the new month. There is a special Haftorah reading that takes precedence over the Shabbat HaChodesh Haftorah reading. Why? Well, think of it this way. When you're doing Torah readings, or when you're doing mitzvah, the mitzvah that occurs more frequently takes precedence over mitzvah that are done not as frequently. That's why the first 6 aliyot were for this particular portion. And then aliyot 7, since we had 3 special events on that one Shabbat, would be Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. It would be a special reading in Numbers that talks about the Sabbath and the new month offerings in the temple. And then the Maftir was Shabbat HaChodesh. Now, Shabbat Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh, takes precedence over Shabbat Chodesh. So the Sabbath of the new moon is read first because it happens 11, 12 times a year. And you're thinking, gosh, Rabbi, why isn't it 12 or 13 times a year? Because the 12th or 13th, if it's a leap year, new moon, new month is, you guessed it, Rosh Hashanah, which of course is so important, it takes precedence over everything. And Shabbat HaChodesh only happens once a year. So it comes in last. However, because it was a special Shabbat, then we do give precedence to that event, that special Shabbat, honoring it by the special Haftorah reading. Similarly, when a festival, like this year it would be Passover, coincides with Shabbat, for Friday night, we don't do a lot of Kabbalat Shabbat. We start the Kabbalat Shabbat, the Friday night service, Shabbat Mariv, at the Sabbath song. So we don't do the Kabbalat Shabbat because that might take away from the enjoyment of the festival. So it's a little bit of a shorter service, and we have a special Amidah for that day as well. So that's why that's why what happened for that Shabbat. This week and next week we have special Shabbatot. We have special readings because Passover has 2 Sabbaths, 2 Shabbatot in it, the first day and the 8th day. Of course, the 8th day would only happen outside of Israel because in Israel, Passover is 7 days. And there's always, of course, one Shabbat that coincides with Passover. It's either the first day or it is during the intermediate days, which is called Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed Chol means secular, Hamoed means the seed. So it's the intermediate days of the festival. So we have two special readings, one for the first Shabbat and one for the second Shabbat. So I'm going to tell you about the first and the second one today. The first Shabbat picks up actually where the maftir for Shabbat HaChodesh left off. Shabbat HaChodesh was Exodus chapter 20, chapter 12, verses 1 to 20. And this we and the first day Passover is Exodus 21 to 51. So in Shabbat HaChodesh, it discusses the commandments to get ready for Passover. Get yourselves a lamb. It's going to be eaten all night. So if you have a small family, invite some other families. If you have a large family, you're probably good to go. Gird your loins, which means tighten your belt. When you slaughter the offering, take the blood with a hyssop plant. That's a very lowly, humble plant, and it's the symbolism is humility, and it's also very spongy and is very absorbent. So you use that to dab the blood and dab it on the two corners of the lintels, which of course is the precursor to, you guessed it, the mezuzah, right? That you put on the doorposts of your home and on the gates of your city. So that was Shabbat HaChodesh. Passover, as you might imagine, continues the story because what happens next? Well, what happens next is that God sends the destroyer, which is an agent of Hashem. And there's different references. Sometimes it says, Hashem, I will go ahead and I will, take the life of all the firstborn in Egypt. So God sends an agent because God does not act in the material sphere because God is not a material being. So God needs agents like the destroyer, like angels and us. God uses mankind, humankind, to do his or her work. Okay. So the destroyer goes, the destroyer is going to see the lintels, the blood, and pass over, hence the name Passover, Pesach, of the houses that have dabbed the blood, because those are the Israelites, and those to leave them alone. There has been a lot of discussion about why the firstborn of all the Egyptians, and it wasn't just the firstborn of the humans, and this is only the men. It was only the men, or the boys, or the men that were taken, but it was also the animals and the maidservants and the slaves. And the idea is that they allowed Pharaoh. They didn't rise up and revolt, so they had to bear the brunt of that. Think of other peoples, that are involved in a war that attack other peoples. And what happens, innocent civilians are caught in the crossfire. There are innocent civilian casualties. Buildings are destroyed. Such is what happens when one people decides to attack another people. When you have war, innocent victims, become casualties, which is sad. But unfortunately, that's what happens. Think of it that way. Now, I'm not excusing it, and maybe rationalizing it a little bit, but we're reading from the Torah. This is what happened, and God saw fit to punish the Egyptians. Now, on the second day of Passover, we have kind of a rundown of the Jewish year. And that's appropriate because Passover is 15 days after the new year. You heard me correctly. It's the first day after the new year, the month of Aviv. Aviv or Abib is the month of spring. Aviv means spring. Tel Aviv means Spring Hill. And that's actually the beginning of the secular year. And actually, there's 4 New Years in the Jewish calendar. If you study Talmud, the tractate of Rosh Hashanah, it starts out talking about the calendar. So it's kind of an interesting tractate in that regard. But we've got the secular calendar, which is now the month of Nisan, and that's when kings ascend thrones, when contracts are ratified, that type of thing. Then, of course, in 7 months, which the second portion describes from Numbers, which describes the various holidays and festivals. I'm getting my bearings here. It talks about Rosh Hashanah. It describes it not as the Rosh Hashanah, but it says Yom Teruah, the day of the sounding of the shofar. It's only later on in the prophets when it's described as a new year. So you see how Judaism has kind of evolved from the Torah to what we do now. So it's fitting then that this for the second day, when we remind ourselves of the Jewish calendar and kind of get ourselves prepared to observe the holidays and festivals of the Jewish calendar, that we read that during Passover. So there is actually a reading for each day of Passover. Now, since there was only one offering, the Hallel that we do for all of Passover is a chetzi Hallel, sort of half. It's not really a half. It's only the first half of two of the Psalms that are not done. But this is why, because there weren't separate offerings. Now, Sukkot, by contrast, there is a full Hallel every day of the intermediate days because there was a separate offering. And that's what Hallel does. All right. See you at services. Remember, 9:30 is when we're starting. Finally, I'm thinking that some of you have expressed an interest in a continuing adult Hebrew reading course. This is April. Hebrew school will end in May, so let's make this a summer course. Let's do it on Sunday before I do the Miller course, or after, because Miller Mate was going to end in June. Okay, so more information to come. Shabbat Shalom, Sameach Pesach, and look forward to seeing you soon.